Hello, and welcome to our Healthy Lifestyle webinar. Today we are featuring Rachel Millstein and discussing the topic of staying connected, maintaining social support and connections as we age. Just want to start off by orienting you to a couple of the details for the webinar. So today's webinar will be about 45 to 60 minutes, depending on how many questions that we get for the Q&A portion. The webinar will be recorded, and we will be posting the recording to our Healthy Lifestyle Program YouTube channel. So we will have this available if you want to review it or share it with friends and family afterwards. Your audio and video are off as participants and cannot be connected. And we encourage you to ask questions through the Q&A feature or by sending a question via chat to the host and panelists. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Millstein.
All right. So thank you so much. I am so glad to be here. Let's try sharing the screen here. All right. Katie and Amy, does this look okay?
Looks great. Thank you, Rachel.
Okay. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad to be here today. I'm grateful to the Healthy Lifestyle Program for inviting me to do this talk. It's a really important part of lifestyle medicine. So today what we're going to do is we are going to talk about the principles of lifestyle medicine, the role of social support in our health. We'll talk about the processes and benefits of healthy social support, and we'll talk about tips and techniques to improve your social support. Okay, and just to confirm, this still looks good on the screen here?
Looking good.
All right, ready to roll. So maybe some of you have tuned into prior webinars, or maybe this is new for you, but lifestyle medicine is the therapeutic use of evidence-based lifestyle interventions to treat and prevent lifestyle-related diseases in a clinical setting, so some kind of, medical setting or adjacent. Lifestyle medicine empowers individuals with the knowledge and skills to make effective behavior changes that address the underlying causes of disease. So I'm a clinical health psychologist, which means that I focus on helping people make healthy lifestyle choices and changes, and talk about how these factors impact our overall well-being, our health, and our mental health. So you can see we talk about healthy eating, physical activity, stress management, avoiding risky substances, improving sleep, and in particular today, we're focusing here on social support, forming and maintaining healthy social relationships, because we know it's so important to our overall health. Just in general, how can lifestyle medicine help? We can improve quality of life, improve weight, physical functioning, improve mood, fatigue, health outcomes, and many, many more benefits. And I will say, in the lifestyle medicine setting, I do see patients in one of our lifestyle medicine clinics here at Mass General. Happens to be through the Cancer Center. And so these are all different kinds of things that we talk about on a regular basis, and how we can help people feel better in their day-to-day life through these lifestyle factors. All right, so I'll start by talking about social support, what it is and why it's important. So as we age, and in what we may call a post-COVID era, or whatever phase of COVID we are in, many of us are feeling isolated. Maybe we aren't seeing each other at work or at regular organized meetings. Maybe our routines are still disrupted. Especially during times of crisis and vulnerability, we need social connections to help carry us through. The types of social support in our lives can change from day to day, and it can come from a variety of sources. Identifying the different types of social support can broaden how we think about our support, our communities, and may help us realize that we have more opportunities for connectedness than maybe we originally thought. So, social connections. Many, many studies have shown the benefits of having a network of social support. There are many different benefits, which we'll talk about. But social support is one of the most important predictors of human happiness and longevity. In fact, health measures, even like blood pressure and heart rate, improve even in the short term with even small positive social interactions. Essentially, social support involves having a network of people, whether it's family, friends, or other, we'll talk about that, that you can turn to in times of need. Whether it's facing a personal crisis, or you need immediate assistance, or if you just want to spend time with people who care about you or to find out new information, these relationships do play a critical role in how we function in our day-to-day life. It's social support that builds people up during times of stress, gives them the strength to carry on and even thrive. But social support is not a one-way street. In addition to relying on others, you also serve as a form of support for the people in your life. So I don't know if anybody watched Friends, but it's sort of emblematic of a lot of the things that we may get from the people in our lives. So social support can buffer, as I said, against the harmful effects of stress, improves our ability to cope with stress, can reduce the impacts of trauma. Social support lowers our stress hormones in our bodies. It can improve the function of our immune system and lower cardiovascular disease risk. Social support improves our survival as we age. And in fact, some studies show that the effect of social support is comparable to the health effects of quitting smoking. It can improve our resilience. It can lower the risk of or the severity of mental illness symptoms, and it can increase our positive emotions. So lots of benefits of social support. But I really want to point out here something I think goes overlooked when we talk about this, but is really important. It's not just one thing. There's multiple types of social support, and we need them all in different ways and at different times. So let's start with emotional support. Emotional support is typically the one that we think about. It's the one that may pop into our minds when we think about social support. Someone that'll accept us and understand us, be there for us. This could come from a close friend, but it could also be our family, or it could also be someone that offers brief encouragement or empathy, like when you get a sympathetic look from someone at the grocery store who's frustrated that they can't find their favorite item, for instance. We're typically accustomed to this type of support, but we also want to think about the other types of support. So let's move to the right, tangible support. That's also known as practical support. This is the proverbial, can I borrow a cup of sugar from a neighbor, for instance? It's a tangible service or a favor. Maybe someone is providing you with, maybe you're getting a ride from a bus driver, or the person who walks your dog, or someone who holds the door for you. It's practical support. And also recognizing when you're given practical support can encourage a feeling of I'm not alone. I can ask for help when I need it. Let's talk about informational support. When you receive an update from the news, do an online exercise video, read an article, listen to a webinar, maybe like this one, this is all informational support. It's a great example of not needing to have an emotional connection necessarily to someone else to feel supported. But when you receive supportive, positive information, that can foster, your intellectual growth or your curiosity, other things that help support our self-esteem. So let's talk about esteem support. This can also be known as affirmational support. This occurs when we're engaged in something where we feel respected. Maybe it's a role at work or volunteering, or maybe you get it from responsibilities with your family or caretaking. Essential and frontline workers, for instance, receive this type of praise from the community. Maybe you offer esteem support to other people when you encourage them. We want to highlight when you receive this type of support and recognize our accomplishments, again, as well as kind of complimenting others. This is crucial to kind of keep up our motivation and our feeling of being supported. And finally, belonging support. Maybe you've experienced this from a community or a notion that we're all in this together in some way, shape, or form in your life. You may also feel this support from a smaller community, such as an organization or a religious group. And even when you can't be there in person, knowing that you're connected to a group and its members does give us a sense of belonging or place. So breaking down these types of social support can help us take an adaptive perspective on the support we have. Maybe we hadn't previously recognized it, and understanding that these types also help to highlight the types of support we may want to develop or strengthen, which is something that we'll do in an exercise a little bit later on. The other thing is people may experience, whether kind of actively or passively, may experience changes to your support network when you experience important life changes. So knowing that the connections that you have today probably don't look the same as they did in the past. Maybe they look different today than they did a year ago. And what's important about that point, though, is that your social support may look different in the future as well. So it's important to reflect on this periodically and notice that even the people or sources of support can give different types of support at different times. Maybe, a partner teaches you how to cook something, but they also listen when you're upset. So let's talk about relationship quality. I'm going to show a video in a moment for just about 5 minutes. This video is a TED Talk by Dr. Robert Waldinger. He's a psychiatrist at M.H.S and a researcher who runs the decades-long longitudinal study of aging. His team analyzed their data and came up with 4 key points that promote a good life. I'd encourage you to watch this entire TED Talk when you have time. The link there is at the bottom, ted.com/talks/ you can just Google Robert Waldinger, Secret to a Happy Life. There's also, he'll reference a prior version of the original TED Talk. This is more reflection on, but the original TED Talk is also excellent. And it talks a lot about, it's very informative. It talks about the quality of our relationships. Time with others protects us from the bruises of life's ups and downs. So I'm going to play this and I'm going to ask Katie or Amy to tell me if it's not working. If I don't hear anything, I'm going to assume that we can all see and hear the video. Okay.
Hello, everybody. I am delighted to be here and grateful to all of you for joining us for this discussion. In 2015, I gave a TEDx talk in a little elementary school auditorium, and much to my surprise, the talk became one of the 10 most viewed talks in the history of TED. And in that talk, I conveyed one simple scientific finding. The finding that when we study hundreds of people over their entire adult lives, the people who turn out to be the happiest and the healthiest are those who have good, warm connections to others. So today, I want to take you deeper into this whole subject by exploring how relationships matter in our lives, how they affect our health, what kinds of relationships give us this big benefit in happiness, and which tools you can start using today to make your relationships stronger. So I do direct this Harvard study of adult development. It's, as far as we know, the longest study of the same people that's ever been done, following people since 1938, from adolescence all the way through old age, and now following all their children, thousands of lives. And we began to find about 30 years ago this startling connection between warm relationships and how good our lives feel to us, our well-being, and also the fact that warm relationships seemed to keep people both physically stronger and kept their brains sharper as they grew older. And we didn't believe the data at first. We thought, how could this?
Oh, sorry.
As we know, stress is our happiness and our physical health. Well, one of the best theories, for which there's now some pretty good evidence, is based on the idea of stress. That, as we know, stress is an inevitable part of all of our lives. Stress happens to us every day. And what we find is that good relationships turn out to be stress regulators. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I have something upsetting happen to me during the day, and I find myself like ruminating about it and really thinking about it and unhappy. I can feel my body go into what we call fight or flight response, where literally my heart rate goes up and I might start sweating a little bit, and I'm just not feeling as well. Now, what we're meant to do is to come back to equilibrium when a stressor goes away. That's the way the body is supposed to work. But what happens if I go home at the end of my upsetting day and I have somebody to talk to? Either I can call someone on the phone or it's somebody I live with. I can literally feel my body calm down. I can feel that fight or flight response subside. But what if I don't have anybody to go home to? What if there's nobody I can call? What we find is that people who are isolated, are lonely, don't have those stress regulators that we get from good relationships, and that we stay in chronic fight or flight mode, that our bodies have this chronic stress, chronic levels of inflammation and circulating stress hormones that wear away our happiness and break down different body systems. Well, what kinds of relationships seem...
Okay, I'll leave you with a cliffhanger here. But I wanted to just play this introduction so that you get a sense of the long-standing data and data analyses that indicate the fact that social relationships, close social relationships are so protective. And also he goes into the mechanisms in terms of our stress response. So if you're interested, please watch more online, freely available to all. As Dr. Waldinger mentions, loneliness hurts us. That's no surprise to anyone, I'm sure. We've all noticed that in our lives. This is something that everyone experiences from time to time. Dr. Murthy is a former Surgeon General, and he pioneered an initiative to look at loneliness. He treated loneliness as a public health crisis. He says our social connections are in fact largely influenced by the institutions and settings where we spend the majority of our time. We live in the most technologically connected age in the history of civilization, yet rates of loneliness have doubled since the 1980s. Loneliness has been found to be associated with a reduction in lifespan, And the reduction in lifespan is similar to that caused, again, by smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's a greater impact on your lifespan than obesity or kind of excess body weight. So if you think about how much time we put into curbing tobacco use and obesity compared to how much effort and resources we put into addressing the epidemic of loneliness, there's no comparison. So all of this is to say, we're really starting to take a closer look at our social connections and the impacts of the social isolation that certainly has been ongoing for decades now, but also, let's say, acknowledge where we are in time has only been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic and the things that we've all adapted to in terms of perhaps being more remote. And I want to thank Katie for putting the link to the chat, the link to the TED Talk in the chat, if you'd like to watch it in the future. So know that if you're feeling isolated and lonely, you're certainly not alone. In fact, there's broad national level attention to this topic. And this is a piece on that says WBUR, interviewing Dr. Murthy. So how does social support relate to healthy lifestyle behaviors? Participation in social groups has a normative influence on behaviors, which is to say, we do what other people around us tend to do. So our social groups often influence whether we eat a healthy diet, when and how and where we exercise, whether we smoke, whether we drink alcohol, use other substances. So social groups can have a negative influence in this regard, right? For instance, where there's peer pressure or influence that leads to dangerous health choices. But group kind of pressure or accountability or support can also lead people to engage in healthy behaviors. If you've ever tried to give up a habit like smoking, probably you realize just how important social support can be. If your social connections don't support you, or you live with other smokers, for instance, it can make success much more difficult. However, if your friends or family offer support or encouragement, you may find that achieving your goal can be much more possible. Sometimes even people, maybe you wear a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, you can connect to a community of other people who are wearing the same devices, and you can have, kind of friendly competitions for your steps, or, the number of minutes you walk, say, oh, how'd you do today? How'd you do today? That kind of thing can kind of help us feel more motivated when we know someone else is out there keeping track of us and caring. And oftentimes that's the role of a health coach, like the people in the Healthy Lifestyle program here, or a physician or a psychologist like myself. So where can social support come from? There's formal and informal ways to access social support. Just some ideas here. Family, friends, coworkers, if you work, schools, neighbors, your healthcare providers, a peer support group, health coaches, communities, whether it's local in your town or city or online, religious groups, hobbies. There's plenty of other ideas. But I did want to give us all a chance to do sort of an activity now. So over here on the right, you see you, me, put yourself in the middle. And think of this as your social support network. Each of these bubbles here can represent a different person or group or animal. So you'll take the next kind of 2 or 3 minutes here to brainstorm as many different kind of sources of support as you can. Put one in each bubble. You do not have to fill up all the bubbles, nor do you have to be limited to this number of circles. But once you figure out kind of who's in your orbit, we'll have you start putting arrows in the direction that your support goes or comes. So let's say you're caregiving for a relative. perhaps the arrow goes in this direction. You're providing support to that person. But remember that they may be also providing you with validation and support. So maybe that arrow comes in this direction. If it's a dog or a pet, for instance, most people think that that support goes in both directions. Sometimes you may feel like you're being very supported by someone else in your community. Maybe you feel that the support arrow goes in that direction. But in this time, I'll stop talking. Let's take again kind of about 3 minutes here to do a little brainstorming and see what you can come up with for your social support diagram. Okay. So hopefully you've been able to get a start at least on what your social support diagram might look like. And as you look at this, we'll ask you to reflect on what you noticed. Who's in your bubbles? In which direction is the support going and coming? Do you feel like you have enough social support? Are there areas in which the arrows are maybe lopsided, or you're getting more than you're giving, or you're giving more than you're getting? Are there ways that you can modulate that? Are there places that you want to develop new forms of social support? And even if you haven't finished this, I'd encourage you to take some time and go through this, at least periodically, because you may be surprised at how things look when you take the time to nail that down a little bit. Let's talk about challenges to social support, particularly, again, as things have changed due to COVID. So for a lot of people, it may have made things feel pretty lonely. There may be or have been anxiety about, of course, getting COVID, physical distancing. A lot of times in-person groups either stopped or switched to online groups. For some people, it was harder, or may still be harder, to access, your medical care. Maybe there's less peer support for different medical conditions, although hopefully that's returned. If you needed to go to a hospital admission, perhaps you weren't able to have as many visitors. Although again, that a lot of that has changed, but perhaps you felt the effects of this in the past 3 years. On the other hand, some people felt that COVID made them feel less isolated. Maybe more people reached out. Maybe if your groups took on new forms, went virtual, maybe that felt more accessible. Maybe you could take a course that you've been wanting to try because now it's on the computer and you don't have to travel, etc. So let's talk about a couple of things, strengthening your existing connections, and then we'll talk about how to form new connections. So take some care if you're feeling like you want to strengthen any connections. Take some care to maybe connect with people when you see them during the week. Maybe you make a point to say hi, to wave, to otherwise acknowledge people you see in passing. You can spend time with people virtually, or if you're homebound, for instance, that's a really good way to see people from a distance. Make the time to spend time with people that you care about. It can be challenging to make that time or to feel like you can reach out, but being there for people who need you, people often feel appreciated and needed when you ask people for what you need. It's not, a burden, it's a privilege for others to help. Think about how you feel when someone asks you for help. Generally, it makes us feel needed, and that feels good. Be flexible, supportive, and excited about what other people are doing in their lives. Maybe you've been meaning to pick up the phone. This might be a good time to try it. Okay. This is a challenge for most people. If this is true for you, know that you are not alone. How do we make new connections? You could meet some dogs. That's just an example that a lot of people just kind of get a kick out of. But if you're not a dog person, fear not. You can volunteer. You can read to kids or seniors over Zoom, for instance. You can volunteer in any way that makes you feel good. If you happen to have or be interested in a religious group or a spiritual group, that's another opportunity to meet people. This is the helping animals, again, for some people, if it's hard to think about approaching other people, animals need our help too. And it's a great way to feel supported, to give support. And maybe you might meet like-minded people along the way. Maybe you go to a local event, music or sports, art, a lecture. In those ways, you can kind of be around other people, get appreciation for things that you care about. But maybe it feels less intimidating to approach when it's not, kind of on a one-on-one interpersonal level. Maybe you help organize community events, join a board, attend community celebrations, parades, festivals, that sort of thing. You could join an online community or class. There's many, many groups that may share similar interests. There's meetup.com. If you're on Facebook, there's usually like kind of affinity groups, again, locally or nationally or internationally, right? This image is showing all the different ways we can connect virtually. You could take a course, maybe at your library, a community college, other community organizations, a senior center. You could take a fitness class, kill multiple birds with one stone. You'll feel great. It could be an online class too. There's plenty on YouTube. There's plenty of apps and programs you could get that will help guide you through yoga, Pilates, Zumba, weight training, anything you like. Try new things. Of note, we do have exercise videos they were recorded through the lifestyle medicine program at the M.H.S Cancer Center, but they're free and open to anyone. Lots of different levels, lots of different types of activities. You can find those on YouTube or the M.H.S. Cancer Center Lifestyle Medicine webpage. So let's think about setting a social support goal for this week. Just think in the short term for this week. Setting goals is a great way to increase your sense of connection, and it's often easier to achieve positive goals, right? So an example of a positive social connection goal might be, I will increase my feeling of social connectedness by joining a group fitness class that meets for an hour, 2 nights of the week. So you want your goal to be SMART. So let's start with the S. Maybe you've used a SMART goal framework for other parts of your life and your work or your health goals. S is for specific. What are you going to do to improve your feelings of connectedness? Be as specific as you can. M is for measurable. How much time, how many sessions? What's a concrete way to know when you've achieved that goal? It has to be measurable. The A is for attainable. What can you do that you will actually be able to do? Okay. So it has to be attainable. We don't want you to feel like you failed at your goals, right? It's much more important to do something small that you can do. That's what starts this upward trajectory of momentum, keeps you going. Realistic or relevant. You want to look for improvement over perfection. It has to be relevant to you. It has to be important enough to you that you want to do it and you think that you can. And time-based. Again, think about for the next week. You also want to think about how frequently you want to do this, how long it will take you to do this commitment. If it's a phone call, you could have, a time that you're able to call someone. You have 5 minutes, you have 10 minutes. That doesn't even matter how much, as long as you have an idea in your mind about how much time you might want to be able to spend on this goal. So maybe we'll take a moment here and think about whether you have a SMART goal for this week that you could use for your social connection. I'll give an example. I have been meaning to get back to someone who wants to do an exercise program together this week. And I really want to do it. And I unfortunately haven't had the time to get back to this person, but I want to. It feels attainable. I know what it is. It's specific and measurable. So my goal actually is to contact this person to set it up. So it can be as big or small as you want. So think about what you might want to do this week. And then I want to talk about what happens when we run into problems. So if you run into problems accessing your social support, you can follow this problem-solving framework. So we'll start here at the top right, and we'll move to the left. So it can be really easy to feel overwhelmed by maybe jumping into something new. And so you want to really define the problem. So in my example, the problem for me is I haven't really had or made the time to contact this person. And just as a side note, thank you so much, Katie, for putting the link to the exercise videos in the chat so you can access those there. Define the problem. The problem is I haven't kind of sat down with my calendar and my phone and said, hey, let's do it Sunday at 5. So that's been my problem. Next, you want to brainstorm solutions and be as creative as you can. Don't filter yourself during the brainstorming phase. So what could I do, for instance? I could say, okay, tonight, I know I have a little bit of time. I'm going to plan it out and I'm going to send her a text. I'm not even going to call. It's going to take too much time. I'm going to send a text and get that conversation started. Or actually, it'll be easier to plan if I do make a phone call. I'm going to call at this time and that time, or maybe I'll look up the schedules for this particular class, etc. Brainstorm it all. And then choose one. So pick one solution that you think you could do this week. So narrow it down. Okay, my best option here is to find the time that I want to go ahead of time and text it to her and see what happens. So I do that, I implement the solution, and then review the results. So here's the part that we really, we don't have full control here, of course, because if it involves someone else or a program that might get rained out, whatever it is, that's all fine, right? This is a cycle. You can always go back and start again. But in this case, let's say, I text this person and the person doesn't get back to me. Ooh, what do I do now? Do I go alone? I don't really want to, et cetera. Or maybe I propose a different time if I don't hear from this person, right? So there's many different ways that we can review the results, but in the end, we want to use this process anytime we encounter some bumps or barriers along the way. And if it doesn't work, you go back to your brainstorm, you pick a different solution, you try another one, review the results, etc. So, what will you try this week? We would encourage you all to try something, whether it's something you've been meaning to do, something that you've been wanting to do, something for fun, something that you haven't even thought of before today. If there's barriers, use your problem solving, work around them, try to do something. If getting somewhere in person is too much, see what you can do online. Think creatively about ways to overcome the barriers, and you may be surprised. Maybe surprised at how much social support you can have or give. So I'll leave you with that thought. As we wrap up, I know we do have some time for questions. So I welcome any and all questions. Nothing is too small or too big. If I don't know the answer, I will try to find people who do. So let me stop my share here.
Thank you so much, Rachel. What a wonderful presentation. And we do have some questions coming in. I do want to answer one question that came up. Someone joined a little bit into the webinar and was just asking if there's going to be a recording. There will be a recording. We're going to be posting this to our MGH Healthy Lifestyle Program YouTube channel in probably about a week's time. So if you missed the beginning, you can access the recording. Okay, so next up, I have our first question is about how effective are virtual connections? Are virtual connections as effective as in-person connections, or should we think about a sort of balance there?
That's a great question. So the first thing I want to say is that I'm not an expert on the literature here. And I know that a lot of this work has sort of exploded during COVID. But what I will say is what we know from, I'll start with my professional life. So in my clinical role, as a psychologist, almost everyone prefers virtual visits now so that they don't have to, for instance, come into Boston, which can be a real pain in the neck for people with parking and traffic, and you know how that goes. So in that case, virtual support offers much broader reach. That's true for a lot of different programs. And so in terms of the availability and the accessibility, it's a big benefit for most people. However, not everyone prefers it. In terms of efficacy, of effectiveness, for instance, we don't see a difference when it comes to things like mental health, because again, those benefits tend to outweigh any perceived negatives. So in that domain, it's essentially just as good. In other areas, though, and now I'm thinking about, online school or, online, programs for kids, for instance, we know that didn't really go so well. So in that domain, we know that being in person has many greater benefits, especially for younger people, which makes sense. When it comes to other types of interactions, it really depends on what you're trying to gain out of the interaction. So, for instance, a lot of group meetings have turned online. And again, it offers very substantial benefits for accessibility, for bringing in speakers, for instance, from afar. Maybe we don't have to pay someone to travel, but they can still give a talk and more people can benefit there. Those types of forums have been really, really helpful. But if you want to go to a performance or a play or, concert, whatever it is, certainly we all agree that being in person makes most sense. So I realize that I haven't given you one concrete answer because it's actually quite nuanced. Um, and the other thing I'll say is another thing that we do know from the literature is that, while, for instance, texting or online messaging can be very efficient, we do not get the same benefits of a one-on-one social interaction as we do when we talk to someone. That could be on the phone. Hearing someone's voice or listening to a voicemail is much more evocative for us. We just respond more effectively, our emotions are much more heightened when we can talk to someone or see someone in person. So that's another difference of texting versus calling or seeing someone. Those things are not equivalent. But again, it depends what your goal is, right? If your goal is to have an in-depth conversation, pick up the phone, see someone in person, rather than doing sort of an online version of communication. Did that answer your question, or did you want to follow up on that?
I think we got it. Thank you. Okay, next question. What suggestions do you have for someone experiencing a lot of stress and lack of support from their family due to a family estrangement situation?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm sorry if that's your situation. I or anyone who's listening, it's a very, very challenging situation because the way that sort of we humans are designed, right? We're social creatures. Back in the day, we kind of grew up, so to speak, in communities, whether that's geographic or, professional or religious or whatnot. And so we are essentially, our brains evolved to seek social connection. And of course, family is the first place that most people would expect to be able to turn for support. That's how we survive. That's how babies, infants, toddlers survive. They need to have an attachment to their primary caregiver or a primary caregiver. And so when those bonds get broken, by an estrangement or other sort of family situation, it's really challenging to navigate. And so I would highly encourage someone to find lots of alternative support. So, again, I'm a psychologist. I highly recommend reaching out to a mental health professional, therapist of any sort. Most people in a mental health setting are trained to provide support in that situation. But in addition, I want to emphasize the benefits of what we may call a chosen family. So these are people who may be friends or part of an extended family, depending on the circumstance, who you really do feel an affiliation with, and who you feel like understand your situation, can kind of be in your team, be in your corner, be on your side. It's extremely important to have those people in the absence of, again, the sort of a family support network that just may not be healthy or reasonable or something that you can rely on at this time. So those would be my primary suggestions. Not, easier said than done. Finding a mental health professional, there's lots of ways you can do that. You can talk to your primary care. You can go online, something like psychologytoday.com, and search. You can ask friends, or you can look through your health insurance. And then in terms of finding kind of a chosen family or, friends who can fill in that role, maybe you have people in mind, reach out. Just try to build those connections. Go do something fun together. And if you don't, it's a good idea to start thinking about how you may be able to find those people, whether it's online communities, book groups. There's lots of people in this situation who want and need to connect. So I would encourage you to think creatively about ways to access sort of this other circle who you can rely on.
Okay, our next question is around pets. So this person was very happy that you mentioned the connection that we can get from pets, and they were wondering if it turns into the same sort of health protective benefits if the connection is with a pet.
It does, actually. I'm so glad you asked. It does. So things that we know about pets. Number one, if it's a dog, for instance, people who have dogs walk more. Makes a lot of sense, right? So already you're getting sort of that practical, sort of necessary goal of increasing your physical activity, increasing your heart health, and everything else that benefits that come with physical activity. Number two, dopamine and oxytocin. So when we pet an animal, for instance, that releases oxytocin. So oxytocin is a bonding hormone. We get it when we touch warm things, other people, animals, etc., in a supportive way, of course. And so that starts to bring down our stress hormones, which then offers the immune support and kind of lowers inflammation, reduces risk of all the things that stress-related illnesses may bring. So it's the opposite of that. Dopamine, also, we feel good. It's the feel-good hormone. We feel supported, and that kind of keeps us happier, which keeps us healthier. So that is part of it. Also, we all know, if we've lived with an animal, we, most of the time we connect, right? We know that we think that they can hear us. We think that they can understand us, and we understand them. And it's the back and forth like that that really does provide support. In fact, there have been studies that and now I'm talking about dogs, but I don't know if this research has been done in cats or other animals. But when we look into a dog's eyes, we do feel that bonding, those same bonding feelings that we do with another person. So that's also the reason we have things like emotional support animals. I won't necessarily go down that road, but because it's, there's emotional support animals, and then there's support and service animals, and they require different training and different things. But certainly that there's a reason that exists, and that's because we do get that level of support.
Okay, next question. We have someone that is in a caregiving role, and so their time is very limited, and they're feeling isolated by the compression in their schedule. Do you have any advice for caregiver connection when time is very precious?
It's such an important point, and I'm really glad that you brought this up. Caregiver support is one of the most important things that you can have when you're in a caregiving role. So I want to really emphasize this. I'm sure anyone in this role has heard this many times before. I'll just say it again because sometimes it helps to hear it from different sources. But taking care of your own needs is what allows you to continue to caregive with the love, respect, and grace that you want to have as a caregiver, that I'm sure you do have, that you value, because that's why you're doing it. So you can't pour from an empty cup is another way to say that. You have to put on your own air mask before you put on someone else's, right? If in the airplane analogy, much easier said than done. I recognize that. And I really do encourage you to find a way, whether it's accessing auxiliary support during a time that you may need to go do something else to support yourself, or respite care is another option. Think again creatively about the ways that you may be able to take a little bit of time for yourself. So in terms of finding that support, certainly you could think about the other people in your life, but I also really do want to encourage and recommend caregiver support groups. There's one for almost every situation that a caregiver may be finding themselves in. For instance, if it's dementia or Alzheimer's and you're a caregiver, there's many, many resources and support groups. But generally, the idea of a support group, is one of the primary things that can be helpful, because again, what does it do? It allows you to take a little bit of a break from caregiving if that's possible, and B, the knowing that you're not alone, right? The isolation that comes with caregiving is one of the hardest parts. So remembering that you're not alone and being able to, so that's the kind of the emotional support, but there's also the belonging support that comes along with that, as well as the practical and tangible support that comes along with, talking through things in a group. You'll learn things that you hadn't thought about, tips and tricks. For other people, it's caring for, someone with, on the autism spectrum, for instance. those types of peer caregiving support groups are extremely beneficial for learning new things and new ways to cope and things to try. So how do you find it? I would say just online, whatever the caregiving situation is, whether it's an aging relative or, some of the things that I've mentioned, or even if it's, cancer support or whatnot. Start by Googling, local support groups, in my area, and put in whatever the condition is. And I think you'll come up with some interesting options. If there's nothing local, an online group is fantastic too.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for those questions. We're just going to transition to the final part of our webinar. I have a few things that I want to promote, so I'm going to share my screen here, and I just have dropped a link to our feedback survey in the chat. So if you're able to navigate to the chat, we would love to hear your feedback on today's topic. We have some questions in there about what you enjoyed, or also possible future topics that we could highlight in upcoming webinars. So just navigating to the chat, clicking on that. You don't have to finish it right away, but you'll open the window so that it won't go away when we conclude this webinar in a moment. And then also what I'm going to do just in closing here is highlight our upcoming webinars. We have them scheduled through December. I'll highlight those in a moment. If you're on today, it's the same exact link. And if you are listening from the recording, I'm going to conclude with the link to our Healthy Lifestyle Program website, where you can get the webinar link there as well. And then we're going to close with some highlights for our lifestyle medicine virtual group visits. So next up for webinars, we have on Friday, October 20th, Brain Healthy Behaviors for Successful Cognitive Aging, featuring Dr. Seth Gale. And then we have in November, we're going to be featuring Jacob Mirsky and Barbara Canada. They are the leaders of our Healthy Lifestyle Program. They're going to be discussing the lifestyle medicine overview and opportunities through our program more in depth. So if you're newer to the Healthy Lifestyle Program, we'd love to have you hear from Dr. Jacob Mirsky and Barbara, who are the medical director and program manager of our program, as well as having Dr. Mirsky has some other roles at the hospital. And then the last one we have scheduled, we have December, addressing poor sleep and insomnia with Dr. Daniel Hall. So we're trying to have a variety of lifestyle medicine pillars highlighted in our upcoming webinars. Again, these are all through the same link. No sign up is required, just like today, and they're open to everybody, free to the general public. And if you're not able to make the times, these are all posted shortly after the live sessions on our webinar, on our YouTube channel for the Healthy Lifestyle Program. And then lastly, I just want to conclude. I'm going to put one more link into the chat here. Okay, oops. Okay, so link is in the chat for our Healthy Lifestyle Program website. If you are receiving primary care, if you have a primary care physician at MGH, you have access to our lifestyle medicine virtual group visits. If you click on the link that was just posted into the chat, you can view our full calendar of upcoming virtual group visits, and the webinars are on there as well with the link to join. So I'd just like to, in conclusion, highlight that we have many offerings. If you are a primary care patient at MGH, we are always running group sessions. We have hypertension and brain care as 4-part series. We have a lot of stress and nutrition groups. We have a diabetes series. I would welcome you to go to the website and see sort of the breadth of all of our offerings for lifestyle medicine groups. These are small group visits that are led by an MGH physician or nurse practitioner, and also facilitated by a coach, where we have some learning in the beginning of the visit, and then we have some collaboration and discussion, and often setting goals or takeaways in the second half of the group. All of that information in terms of next steps and how to access that is on our website. And with that, I'm going to stop our share just so that we can say goodbye. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you, Rachel. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. And we hope you can catch us for our upcoming fall and winter webinars.
Thank you.
Thank you.